So the automated webinar running 24/7 with an automated sales agent who's selling for you 24/7 with an automated presentation. Any person watching this could build their entire sales system today. I'm happy to be on record saying this today. If you're fast, you can do it in an hour. If you're first time doing it, 2 hours, you could have the whole system. And that is the transformational thing about living in today's age with AI. You're combining traditional marketing methods with the power of AI. I think that is the secret to scaling for 2026 and beyond.
Today, we're diving deep into what sets WebinarKit apart from its alternatives like EverWebinar or Zoom with the CEO and co-founder of WebinarKit, Stefan Ciancio.
Thanks for having me, Martin.
Before we dig into the products, maybe you can give us a 30-second background who you are and what you were doing before even creating WebinarKit.
Absolutely. So I came from a world where I, went to school. I got an engineering degree. I was a mechanical engineer, and I worked in Danbury, Connecticut for a while. And it was boring, not really my cup of tea. I didn't see myself being stuck in that cubicle for the rest of my life. So I always had an entrepreneurial itch. So, my mom is Greek and my dad is Italian. They both came here as kids from Greece and Italy. So I feel like I always had that immigrant hustle in me. And I always just wanted to do my own thing. Basically when I got my degree in 2012 and I worked my first job, I was just like, this can't be all there is to life. It was just miserable working that 9 to 5. And I wanted to figure out a way to get out of that and work for myself. So I went on a journey. I basically started figuring out ways to make money online. I did a lot of things. I did e-commerce. I did ranking blogs in Google, like SEO related. I did digital products. I did consulting, coaching, agency work. And one of the ways that I was able to always get sales to my products was with webinars. And eventually, come around 2019, one of my close friends who's a software developer said, "Hey, all this tech you're using to run your webinars, you mentioned some of the names before, right? They were barely current. They were hard to use. A lot of them, especially for an automated webinar, which is just a webinar that plays by itself, it didn't even autoplay the video." So I remember being annoyed with all these tools. And then, my now co-founder said, "Why don't we just build something better, something that's modern, that's easy to use, that's built for marketers that actually want to get sales with their webinars?" I said, "Let's do it." So we actually launched WebinarKit in January of 2020, which was a good time apparently to launch a webinar software. So, we did that, and we've been running it ever since then. And, now we've had over 20,000 people use the tool. And you mentioned we're getting into AI very heavily, and we're kind of leading the pack as far as that goes. And that's kind of the shorts.
So what was the first version like? I bet it was pretty different from what we see today.
Yeah. The first version was just an automated webinar player, and it was good. It worked. But, of course, you get feedback from your users, and they start asking, "Hey, can you add this? Hey, can you add that?" And it's been a never ending evolution. We started very simple. We didn't even have live webinars when we launched. We didn't have white label, and we certainly didn't have any AI stuff. I don't even think it really existed. So we just listened to our users, and since in 5 years we've the first version I don't even think had a page builder. I think it was just you put some info in and it built a very simple landing page. Now we've actually got full-blown templates. So yeah, it's been, thinking back, it's crazy to think how far we've come in the last 5 years.
Okay, so let's get practical. I'm running my blog on findfocus.net where I review a lot of software, but I also plan to, I recently wrote a book called Clarity on Demand, and I will probably have a higher ticket product for that, and I'm considering doing a webinar for that to sell that. So essentially think of me like I'm the target user of potentially making the switch from EverWebinar to WebinarKit. So walk me through exactly how I would use WebinarKit to sell an online course or a coaching program, something like this, or even tell us what are the typical products and use cases for people who buy WebinarKit.
Yeah. Well, my first question to you would be, do you have a sales page for your product?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so what I would do is I would take that sales page, put it in the WebinarKit script generator. So it's going to generate your 7-figure webinar script. We basically took 20,000 data from 20,000 users and our own multi-7 figures in sales running webinars, and we created the perfect cocktail of a sales presentation. This isn't some generic output from ChatGPT. It's a trained AI that we've curated on the back end to create a high converting webinar for anyone to sell anything. So what you do is you put your website in. If you don't have a website or you don't have an offer, we have an offer builder as well in our AI. But whether you're using the offer builder or you already have an offer, just put your info in. You could either load your website or a paragraph about your offer, and it will autofill all the details you need to create the perfect webinar. And then in there, you just, if anything's missing, you populate it, you press a button, it generates exactly what's going to go on each slide. And then from there, you go to the next step, which is building the actual slide deck. So then I would build your webinar. You could have your webinar done in 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and high converting, right? If you want to make any adjustments, everything's fully editable. Then if you want to narrate it, with AI, you can connect your HeyGen clone, or you can just use a stock avatar if you don't want to do that. We have avatars for multiple, genders, languages, whatever. Like, you could choose whatever you want. And then basically from there, you can just put the presentation that you just generated entirely with AI into a webinar. And that webinar will run 24/7. Bring in people, nurture them, sell them, and then put them on your list, make them raving fans, know, like, and trust you, all of that good stuff. And that's what I would do if I were anyone who's looking to get sales, who doesn't want to post endlessly online, doesn't want to get on a ton of sales calls, and doesn't want to just do live webinars every week because it gets tiring. So I think that's what I would do if I were someone who just wanted to get the system up and running, right? Nothing converts better. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I think that's kind of the general idea.
Yeah, I was also part of Jason Flatlian's mastermind at some point with Rapid Crush, his GOAT webinars and his frameworks. It's one of my best-selling affiliate products on my blog, actually. So I think like what you described is basically the fastest process to get a minimum viable product out there. And then you probably go there and tweak it and run the webinar live or automated. Maybe you can tell us also a little bit about the different versions of WebinarKit, because we touched on this in the pre-chat, essentially, because you mentioned there's different versions, and this is something I have not covered in detail, and that might confuse people. So yeah, what's the difference between the two versions, and how is WebinarKit positioned to help you run either live webinars or automated webinars?
Yeah, definitely. Before we get to that, one thing I want to touch on what you just said. Yeah, you basically create the automated webinar, and then you can either run it as is or you could tweak it. Now, here's what's interesting. I was sitting next to Jeff Hunter, who is he sells AI products. He's an AI influencer. And we were at an event, and he was telling me, he's a funny guy. He was going to go on Onyx Singal's. He was doing a webinar with Onyx Singal, and Onyx asked him to create some slides for the product they were going to sell. And Jeff said, I don't have a webinar yet, and I'm presenting in like 4 days. And I was like, oh, I know exactly how to solve this. So we sat down, we took his link, we made the slides. And he was blown away. He's like, wow, I can't believe this is actually good. And he ran it as is. He took exactly the output. We made maybe 5% tweaks, small things like logistical, like, oh, this is not true, whatever. Very small. We did the whole thing in 30 minutes. He ran the webinar and they closed 15% to their, I think it was a $1,000 course by the end of the webinar. So the output does convert really well out of the box. Obviously, you're welcome to tweak it as much as you want, and you should. But I thought that was an interesting proof of concept, because the idea here is that you can actually get sales from the direct output. We don't want to give people garbage or make people think that they're just going to get something that's horrible and they have to do all the work all over again. This works out of the box, and we have testimonials. Another guy, Daniel Cho, he created his first webinar, ran it to his audience. He said he made $22,000 just with the output from the webinar decks. It's been working really well. We use it for some of our products as well. And obviously me being a user helps me make sure that I feed back into it to make sure that it only keeps getting better and better. Anyway, yeah, I just wanted to share that because I think a lot of people might be wondering, does this, okay, it makes slides, but do those slides actually convert?
Okay, so getting back to the live versus automated question, can you tell us a little bit about the difference in terms of where each webinar and framework and approach works and where it does not work, or maybe live converts better but automated runs 24/7? What are the difference? Why do you have two different versions of WebinarKit?
Yeah, great question. So we have the automated webinar software, which was the original one. And basically that lets you run automated webinars and like live webinars. So you can run them on demand, or you could pick a set time and the recording will play. The other option is live webinars. So basically what we did was we initially separated them out into two products, because not everyone who wants to run automated webinars wants to run live webinars, and not everyone who wants to run live webinars wants to run automated webinars. So we have two different products, WebinarKit and WebinarKit Live. And if you want both, you can look at our bundle option, which is called the best deal ever. This is what we call the fast track because not only is it automated webinars and live webinars, but it also includes white labels, so you can rebrand the whole thing and resell the tools. So you'd have a suite of 5 in-demand AI tools that you can rebrand and resell for 100% profits. But it also comes with community. It comes with full access to the AI webinar builder that we just discussed, comes with coaching with me. It comes with a private community just for white label partners. So you kind of get everything. It really is the fast track. So we kind of tried to create plans to meet everyone for where they were at in their business. If you're just new and you're looking to just run automated webinars, try a $1 trial of automated webinar kit. It's just webinarkit.com. If you're just looking to run live webinars and you've got all the other pieces that you need already, go to getwebinarkit.com/live. If you are looking for a full-blown sales system that does it all with the tools, white labeling our product for additional profits, coaching with us, and really taking your sales to the next level, building a sales system, that would be the fast track bundle, the best deal ever. And that is just getwebinarkit.com/best deal ever. So, we try to keep the plan simple, and sometimes it can get a little confusing, but we try to make sure that there's, where you're at, you can kind of pick the plan that works best for you.
Yeah, that's awesome. And one thing that surprised me was actually the white label version, because I've not seen something like this for any other webinar software. Like, who would be the perfect customer for that? And obviously, I will put links to all of that into my description and into the description of this video.
Yeah, so there's a few different people who would be benefiting from the white label. I would say the first person is anyone who's selling anything marketing related, because if you're a coach or a consultant, and or even an agency, and you help people with ads or webinars or copywriting or whatever, having a software that is under your own brand, A, gives you credibility, and B, gives you another passive income source. Because maybe you want to, let's say you're a webinar agency, right? Just one example, and you want to have different tiers, right? Maybe you want to have the do-it-yourself tier. You can white label our tool and sell people the access to create their own webinars and run their own webinars, right? And create accounts for them. So now you have that level where you could charge $97 a month, $197 a month, and you keep 100% of the profits on each sale. Then you can, if you're already doing a done with you and a done for you solution, then even better. Now you just have that layer of recurring income underneath, and it differentiates you from every other agency, because most agencies don't have their own software. And we all know psychologically, for whatever reason, when you have a software, there's an additional layer of credibility and authority. So it works extremely well to just have that layer there. Now, outside of that, anyone in the marketing space can leverage that software to add that credibility, that authority, that passive income. Now, if you're someone who doesn't have a product, well, white labeling is the best way to get a product. And the beauty of white labeling WebinarKit is it's already got product market fit. It already has a proven product across 20,000 customers. And you don't have to spend $100,000 to develop your own software. It's already done. You don't need to know how to code. You just go in there and replace a logo, and it's basically yours. So, the second person is anyone without a product. And basically, I think those are really it. Whether you're already selling something online, this can kind of be a bolt-on to make additional revenue for you, create another layer of continuity in your business. And if you don't have a product, well, white labeling is better than affiliate marketing, because with white label, A, it's your own brand. You're not competing with other people who are promoting. It's now your brand. And also you keep 100% of the commissions.
Awesome. Like, what are things that like getting back to my use case where I have I'm an experienced coach, or like I have my own frameworks and things like this. If somebody wants to create a brand new webinar, or like sell their existing coaching package, or like products via a webinar, what is the right price point, or what kind of offer work really well for webinars?
Yeah, so webinars work really well, especially for anything around, you could go as low as $197 up to like $2,997. Generally, you could sell directly on a webinar. You can also direct people from the webinar to book a call. So if you prefer to close people at a higher price point, maybe you have a 5K or a 10K program or a 25K, I don't know. You can run people to the webinar and then get them on a sales call. And whether it's you taking the sales calls or you have a sales team, they're going to love you, or your sales team are going to be very happy, because anyone who's coming off of a properly structured webinar, such as the one that we, using the framework we've created, by the time they get to the call, they're going to be educated on the product. All of their objections are going to have been taken down, and they're going to know exactly what they're signing up for. So at most, there might be a couple of objections on the phone call that you still have to overcome, like, oh, hey, I'm sold, but like, can I start on the second week instead of the first week? There might be something small that wasn't addressed on the main webinar. And then just like that, you have the sale. You don't have to start from scratch on the sales calls to overcome all these objections. And, another thing is it's very hard to put exact numbers on things because there are people who are selling 5K and more just direct from webinar, right? So it really depends on what you're doing. But like at the end of the day, a rule of thumb is like 197 to 2997, put it on a webinar. Above 2997, put it on, put it to a book a call on the back end of the webinar. That's, again, there's nuance to this, but that's a rough guideline for most people.
If somebody wants to create a new webinar from scratch, where do they get stuck and sell their product via webinars?
Do you mean like the presentation or the webinar funnel?
Yeah, both. Like the creating the whole webinar experience sales funnel. So I guess the webinar is part of that.
Yeah. Well, on the presentation side, I would say kind of like we discussed, it's not having a proven format, right? Because you kind of need to take people on an exact journey, right? You have the hook, the hero's journey, the 3 secrets that take down the objections, explaining the offer, the offer stack with all the bonuses, and then a proper frequently asked questions section. If you're not following that format, I'm not saying you won't convert, but especially if you're new, you should be following a proven format, right? Once you get really good, maybe you can go off the cuff. And, you mentioned Jason Fladley, and I'm sure that if he wanted to, he could close 30% on any webinar without slides, right? But for most people starting out, that's just, you haven't built that muscle yet. So start with a proven slides. I think that's step number 1. And then when it comes to the webinar, my advice is that you should be doing 2 things, ideally. And number 1, everyone should be running an automated webinar at all times. This is just the automated salesman. Every day, that's your lead magnet. It brings people in and it attracts people who want to learn, which is who you want on your list. So honestly, I'm going to sign up for a class of XYZ. You get their info. And then they want to learn, right? And then on the webinar, the automated webinar will nurture them quicker than, sending them to a PDF or whatever, right? It's the next best thing to a live webinar without having to be live. It's like the Netflix versus cable news, right? Netflix is on demand. And basically, because of this, it could be running 24. And our automated webinar is on our website, collecting leads, nurturing leads 24. So our list is always building and getting nurtured, right? Now, some people ask me, well, what about conversions? Now, generally speaking, you see higher conversions on live webinars, but you want to have that layer, that foundation of automated webinar running 24/7 because it's building your list. And now when you run a live webinar, whether you're going to do that once a month or once every 3 months or whatever, by the time you send that message, right, and you say, hey guys, I'm going live, all these people who watched your automated webinar are like, oh my God, this guy's going live. I got to see him live, right? Because it's kind of like someone who listened to your music and then you're doing a concert and they're like, oh my God, I listen to all this guy's music. I need to go to the concert, right? So they might not convert just from listening to your automated webinar will obviously make sales, and I can give some strategies on how to optimize that. But just the concept of it needs to be running 24/7. That's your channel of building awareness and building trust without having to do anything, right? And now when you do stuff with that list, you'll make sales.
So what is one feature of WebinarKit that power users love that maybe beginners don't even know that it exists?
Outside of the webinar builder, right? Because we kind of already covered that. I would say the other really cool one that we have is the AI sales agent. So what this does is when your automated webinar or live webinar are running, let's say if it's an automated webinar, obviously no one's live, right? If it's a live webinar, you might not be able to answer the chat messages right away because you're presenting, right? So essentially this AI chat can be trained to respond to people's messages. And it's not just like generic output. You can train it so that it knows exactly what to say. So if someone is ready to buy in the chat on an automated webinar, no one responds, you might lose thousands of dollars from that sale, right? So the AI will answer and nurture that person in the chat specifically to what you train it on to work best, to handle an objection, a question. So your conversions are optimized from the chat because there's an AI in there selling for you and people are loving it. And it's so needed because I feel like if no one is manning the chat, you're really missing, you're creating a profit leak in your webinar.
And one thing, I signed up for your webinar on the website, and one thing that I really like that I have not seen before was that you created a chat where it commented the actual content of the webinar. So I think it will help a lot with people sticking to the webinar because everyone is used and trained to get distracted and having a second screen or their mobile or things like this. And if you do not have a live audience or something like this, I feel like it can really help to be transparent, saying like this is automated or AI generated content, but it will still keep people glued and provide this additional distraction so they still stay focused, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's funny, I'll comment on that real quick, but I always like, because that's another feature we have is the chat simulator, right? There's the AI chat responder, which will respond to someone else's message, but the AI chat simulator will just, will just comment throughout the presentation. And I have people messaging me and say, oh, that's unethical. I'm like, no, it's just a tool. How you use it is how you determine the ethics. So the way we use it is exactly what you said. Basically, I created a funny caricature called Mr. Chatty, and Mr. Chatty is the fun It kind of reminds me, do you remember Microsoft Word, that little paper clip that
Yeah.
was always, I kind of visualize it like that, where I'm like, it's just there and it's like a little cartoon guy who's guiding you along. And to your point, it just makes sure that they get the main point you want them to get, right? Because with a webinar, there's a lot of subliminal conditioning that goes on the back end. And I just say, okay, if they don't get it on the actual webinar, Mr. Chatty is going to make sure they get it. So basically, he runs 24/7 and he guides them along. So when you combine, like, create your own caricature, right? You could call it Alicia the bot. I don't know. You could create your own caricature and just have the caricature guide the person throughout the webinar. And I think that's a cool feature that I think, in my mind, an ethical, quality way to use the chat simulator function.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I never saw it that way, but when I saw it, like, I thought like, yeah, that's a really genius way of using that feature. So a lot of people saying, essentially what I see is that the market of webinar has matured, like people like Sam Ovens, who run like his a big webinar back in the days. Now he's moved over to school and to communities, and some people might even say webinars are dead. So what would you be your response to that, and how do webinars work in this matured market that we are in right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I'll say is that, just like I've been hearing that email is dead for the last 13 years since I started. Email is not dead, but things have changed. So email is now, rather than being, it used to say the money's in the list. Now I'll say the money's in the audience, right? So the email list is a critical part of your audience, but now you do have to be multifaceted. Same thing with webinars. So that webinar, that long form presentation, there is always going to be people who are going to consume long form content. There might be less now, right? Now that there's other options, but there's going to be people who like long form content, right? Movies are not going away. Someone is going to watch your 90-minute webinar. But at the same time, we cannot ignore that things have shifted in a sense that now people do want to consume information quicker, and people have been conditioned to consume information much quicker. So what you do is I call it marketing love languages. So, you create the webinar, you start with the webinar as the foundation for the people who watch the long form content. But if you want to get the maximum conversions, you do need to take that format, that same messaging, that same journey that they go on the webinar, and put it into different formats. So one thing we do is we create a PDF of the webinar, and now anyone who registered for the webinar and didn't watch it, we retarget the completed registrations on Meta. You could do this on different platforms, and you could email it to them and say, hey, we noticed you didn't finish the whole presentation. We totally get it. Who's got 90 minutes to watch a webinar right now? Want a PDF version that you can consume in 3 minutes that gives you the highlights, right? So we now use the webinar presentation as a way to get people in. And remember what I said earlier. I said the types of people who come into a webinar funnel are the best types of people. I was just at a business mastermind, and someone told me that they were getting more sales from the leads who opted in from the webinar but didn't consume the webinar, that just watched the 3-minute version and booked a call. And remember, it's because I told you, anyone who opts into a webinar is the right type of lead. Whether they watch that webinar or not, you have them on your list now, and you could retarget them, and you could hit them with a short version of the webinar, 3-minute video, 2-minute to consume PDF. And now you have hit the short form people and the long form people. But having the webinar as the lead magnet allows you to capture all of those sales.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's a great tip for strategy and running webinars in general. Any other tips when it comes for that people who are already running webinars or who think of like switching to WebinarKit, like anything that would be beneficial to them?
Yeah, I mean, we're marketers, and we built WebinarKit because we saw problems in the marketplace with other platforms that were not built for max conversions and were not built for ease of use. And Martin, in your opinion, I'll tell you what I think, but in your opinion, what's the number one reason people don't run webinars in their business?
The number one reason is probably because it's a lot of time and work to create a webinar. That's the first one and
Yeah,
the
so
most
that's
obvious one.
basically, and the translation of that is they don't have one, right? They don't have a webinar.
Yeah.
So how can they run something they don't have that now takes months of time to create? So that's why I think what we did, which is so powerful, is we give you the webinar. You can build the webinar in minutes, literally minutes, and it will convert out of the box. And if you want to improve it, go to town. Do as much as you want. So I think, to be honest, that's one of our biggest pioneerings this year. And we've had so much good feedback from people to say, wow, like it was just create the missing piece that people need. It's not gate kept behind months of work or paying an agency $20,000 anymore. Outside of that, on the conversion side, we've really tried to build in as much AI as possible. So the AI sales agent, right? You want to be selling 24/7. So the automated webinar running 24/7 with an automated sales agent who's selling for you 24/7 with an automated presentation. Any person watching this could build their entire sales system today. And that's what I think the big breakthrough is. This is not going to take you months of time. You could start, and I'm happy to be on record saying this, today. Literally if you're fast, you can do it in an hour. If you're first time doing it, 2 hours, you can have the whole system. And that is the transformational thing about living in today's age with AI. You're combining traditional marketing methods with the power of AI. I think that is the secret to scaling for 2026 and beyond.
Where do you think is this whole industry headed in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? I think AI is going to become more and more prominent, but I think in my mind, what's probably going to happen is there's going to be some people who are very quick to adapt AI, and those people are going to see their revenue shoot up. And I think everyone else is going to be kind of stuck. So I think, for lack of a better terms, if you can't beat it, join it. And I'm very on board with AI. I believe it is the future of anything. And I think the people who are adapting now are going to be kind of like, they're going to be like adapted versions of themselves, where like you're learning how to leverage all these tools. Like I was telling my business partner the other day, I'm like, I feel like I'm managing 5 AI employees at this point, right? Where I have the graphic design, the sales copy, social posts, meta images for ads, affiliate management, even now being done mostly by AI. So webinars done completely by AI. So this is the future, and one man can do the work of 10 to 100 people if he has the right systems and he's equipped properly. And I believe that is going to separate the people who are adapting and kind of bolting on this AI power to themselves. And then the rest of the people who are not doing it, I hate to say it, it's going to be much harder to compete with that.
And what are you most excited about when it comes to WebinarKit specifically?
When it comes to WebinarKit, we've got some cool stuff coming out. We really want to build out the AI side a lot more. We want to create, like I mentioned earlier to you, that the webinar is the most important piece, but you can create offshoots. So being able to create that 3-minute PDF, being able to create a 3-minute version of your webinar that you can now use in your marketing to say, hey, you missed the 90-minute presentation. Here's a 3-minute video. Here's a PDF. We want to add those other pieces of the funnel, because I mentioned to you before, webinars are not dead. Oh, I don't even think I finished my thought earlier. Webinars are not dead, but they have evolved, and they are now a necessary part of an ecosystem versus the whole piece, right? 10 years ago, you could run a webinar and make 100 grand. I don't believe you can really do that. Some people do, right? But on average, the average person is not going to be able to fire up a webinar and close 100K on sales. You need the system. You need to be consistent. So I believe that's kind of where we're evolving the tool. This is a big one. We're working on making the entire tool agentic. And what I mean by that is, how you go into ChatGPT or you go into Lovable or all these other apps, you just talk to it and it does what you want it to do.
Yeah.
That's the big project for beginning of 2026, is that you can go into WebinarKit and say, hey, now, like, instead of like right now we have AI where you have to, you press a button and it creates it. But if you want to change something, right, we want to have the agentic piece where you just chat to it and say, hey, fix this slide, or hey, I want to change the starting point of my webinar, and it just does it. That's the next step. And I think making WebinarKit agentic is going to be another really powerful thing that keeps us ahead of the pack in terms of making it as easy as possible for people to run their webinars.
Okay. Last question. If somebody's watching our interview here and they're interested in WebinarKit or interested in running a webinar, their first webinar, but they are still skeptical, what would you tell them?
Well, we have a free webinar that they could watch on our homepage if they would like to learn more. And also, you could always start with a $1 trial on a regular WebinarKit plan. And if you love it, you could always, upgrade into the best deal ever once you realize, okay, this is pretty great.
Okay. And obviously, people can read my in-depth review where I break down everything for a different consumption format, something that I find. And this is why we're creating this video as well. Some people learn better from interviews. Some people learn better from highly structured videos or webinar presentations, and some people still like to read long form blog posts and reviews, especially when it comes to choosing the right software. And so yeah, make sure you click this the link below this video. And any final words from your side?
Crush 2026. Let's do it.
Okay, thank you so much, Stefan, for the interview.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's fun.